live. Okay. Finally. Hi, everybody. Sorry for that quick. I was on for a brief second, and I think we dropped off because I had to adjust my resolution. So welcome everybody to the Power Platform Share number 15. Can you believe this is our 15th one, Mariano?
I can believe it. It's been certainly quite a journey. I know we
Yes.
were sort of like off for a bit, and we got back on track. Hopefully, this is going to be a good stretch of programming and entertainment for everybody. So,
Yeah.
we welcome everybody in the audience so far.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Belinda Allen. This is my wonderful, fabulous, super smart friend Mariano Gomez, and we love talking about anything having to do with the Power Platform. So super excited about that, and I think between even just the two
I
of
love your
us.
hair color, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Speaking of Power Platform, Matthew Rose, who works for Microsoft, he sports purple hair, and I have been quoting him endlessly for months. So at the MVP Summit, I did a homage to him, if you will, and did my hair purple,
Interesting.
and I have kept it purple ever since. So it's a lot of fun for me. I don't, and that's all that matters. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we got going on. So anyhow, thank you for saying that. And thanks to everyone. Sorry we were just about 15 minutes running late, or 30 minutes late. We had an emergency to take care of, and struggling with resolution a bit. So Mariano, I want to tell you something. Dynamics Con was this week, right? Did you
Yeah.
present?
No, I did not.
Oh, that's surprising. But anyhow, so for those of you who don't know how Dynamics Con works, it's a great conference, and it's fantastic presenting for them. They record your sessions beforehand to make sure that the sound quality and the video quality is there, and to make sure that you're going to be able to cover all your topic in the given period. And then the speakers are live for Q&A. And so when you join in as a speaker, they put you join in a different area, and they put you in this virtual green room. And literally, Mariano, he said 1 minute to live, and I went to type in the word Roger, and my internet went out.
Oh boy.
So I went
Yeah, not fun.
running in all the way across into where my router is, and restarted it, came back, turned on my Wi-Fi phone. I was only a minute late, and fortunately I had the wonderful Mark Rhodes, Mark, and as my question moderator. So
As your
he
question
was able
moderator,
to
yeah.
cover for me. So he was answering the first question as to why why I was a
As to what
no-show.
happened to Belinda.
Yeah, she was just here, I promise. So that's funny. But I'm excited that you're not only hosting today, but you're a guest, because I always learn from you. And you've been working a
Yeah,
lot with DevOps, and I'm
I
interested
have.
to
I've
know
been
more.
I've been sort of like a power platform DevOps crusader. That's kind of my new role, and trying to advocate for um, standard pro dev practices in what is now a citizen developers world. So
My world.
I like the things that yeah, I like the things that I've been seeing as of late, and certainly, I just got off of Powerful Devs Conf 2021. So it's a conference geared towards the citizen and pro dev. I think nowadays, the concept of fusion teams is what's resonating across the industry, and fusion teams are nothing more than teams that are made up of diverse set of individuals, namely, your typical code first developer, and now your citizen developers as part of that whole ecosystem. So very interesting.
I gotta write that down. Fusion
Yeah,
teams. I
fusion
like that.
teams. Yeah, so it's a very Microsofty term and concept,
Yes.
but it's it's been certainly something that has kind of taken a front and center spot as of late. So not that it hasn't been practiced before. It's just probably you probably knew this with other terms and concepts and whatnot, but the idea of fusion teams had been around for quite some time. So nonetheless, I think it's a good moment to start highlighting the importance of fusion teams in your, especially in your low code, no code development practices. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's pretty exciting. And so, what was your presentation on?
of course, DevOps, Power Platform ALM. So application lifecycle management. I think we throw around some of these acronyms all the time and don't explain what they are. But yes, definitely Power Platform ALM. That has been, as I said, I've been on a crusade almost to advocate for application lifecycle management practices in your everyday citizen developer experiences. So that's where I am. That's what I do. It's my passion, And if you actually go around and look at my YouTube channel, I have quite a bit of videos that I've put out there. Every time something new comes up, I have to obviously update my content and sort of like ask myself, how does that fit into your typical developers or code first developer experiences, and put some content out there to continue guiding the community.
I like that you're on a crusade for that because I definitely fall in. I'm actually I under say myself a lot. I'm between citizen developer and pro developer,
Mhm. Yeah,
but
sure.
I'm happily residing in citizen developer land. But I know because I am in that mode, I speak with a lot of citizen developers, and so many of them aren't aware of even understanding the concept of ALM or application lifecycle
Yep.
management as let alone doing it. So
Yep.
that's a pretty critical piece. So I'm glad that you're promoting that.
Yep. So as you probably know, that traditional engineering practices, software engineering practices, demand the ability to uh, do things in stages, and certainly be able to account for certain things that happen at each one of those stages. And this is probably why at the very beginning, the low code, no code movement did not have much acceptance among the traditional um, software development and software engineering teams, because they didn't see how it fit within the pattern. But now, with some of the tooling coming out for these platforms, and I'm not only talking about Microsoft, I'm talking industry wide, um, you're seeing more and more adoption of low code, no code platforms for traditional software development practices, where you can put things in the hands of citizen developers, yet maintain a high level of engineering standards around how you deliver and deploy code across the enterprise. So
Cool.
yeah.
That's very cool. And so do you apply this primarily to Power Apps, or do you apply it across all of the platform that you work with?
So application lifecycle management has been around for almost since the very beginning of software development, right? So this is not only applicable to Power Platform, and as you probably know, even in we come from the Dynamics GP world where
Mm-hmm.
you do dexterity development. Even in the realm of dexterity development, you still have to apply some engineering practices to deliver code. Professional developers know that, and for the most part follow those standards. So we had, I think, companies like Microsoft and even Amazon and these other companies that do low code, no code platforms have realized that they need to bring the experience to the citizen developer, but also need to appeal to the traditional engineering teams, software engineering teams, and software development teams to establish those standards. So, yeah, not only applicable certainly to Power Platform, but also it's actually a software engineering concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I was used to always the smaller realms of development, and especially I remember my first bit of development, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
VBA for
Yep.
on with modifier on GP. Oh, Mariana, you're gonna laugh when I tell you this. I found and this was like pre predominant internet. Internet was just getting going pretty
Mm-hmm.
good then. I mean, it's like, and still not everybody quite had it, but I found a few sample lines of VBA code. I didn't know it, and I actually wrote an application for a customer that even stored the data in duos using VBA. And then I took the modifier with VBA course, and they kept laughing at me because I kept saying, "Oh, that's why I did that." But fortunately, I gave everything I did to my husband, who was also my business partner, and he documented it. But I've learned, yeah, that's not the way you do things. But
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because even from those days, uh, part of what I used to do is make sure I still store that type of code in a repository. So it's not like it's a foreign concept. It's never been a foreign concept. It's just how you approach um, and establish standards when you are closer to the citizen developer. And if you think about it, when you used to do VBA code, you were kind of like a power user,
mhm.
right? You had the knowledge of the application, yet you had a little extra knowledge of development that allowed you to do minor customizations to the application. So that's the same concept that we face today with Power Platform. Group of individuals who have a little bit more of that extra oomph for an understanding of software
Mhm.
development, but obviously understand clearly the concepts that the business requires and how to implement solutions around those problems. So you want to make sure that you still maintaining a high level of delivery. And I'm not talking about citizen developers now. If you look at this from an ISV standpoint, right, which you are also familiar with, that
Mhm.
McCorma, who I work for, are, we are an ISV company, and we've been delivering solutions for the last 40 years or 30 years to the Dynamics GP market. Um, but even for us, it's important to maintain those software engineering practices because we do deliver commercial code on the Power Platform, and it's necessary to keep those standards in place.
So you mentioned that you keep it in a repository. Do you use more than one or just one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we obviously have we are primarily a Microsoft shop, so we maintain our repositories on Azure DevOps. But typically it depends on the project, how many repositories you want to create for your code. But we currently maintain a standard repository with different branches depending on what we need. So um, just to keep it simple and narrow down as a concept, that's kind of how we do it. But here's what I'll do. I'll invite you to see at a high level what this looks like if you want to
Yeah,
go
I
from
would
there
love to
now.
see it because I like
Sure.
the idea of using Azure DevOps because of security. And
Mm-hmm.
you can make sure that you're only using your proper security. And I like that. You could use your Azure Active Directory to help you guide, and I like that much better. Okay, so I see your
Yeah.
Power
So
Apps.
I'm going to contrast a little bit what it used to look like for us professional developers at from our optic, what Power Platform used to look like, and now what we have available to help us with um, traditional software engineering methodologies for application lifecycle management. So if you remember before, you used to create your applications, right? You would then have, hopefully, if you were following some sort of standard, you actually solutions, and within solutions, you would embed your concept, right? Um, Now, if you wanted to take this solution and move it to a separate environment, what would you do? Or even a separate tenant, you would just basically click on this stuff here and export that solution.
Right.
That then would generate a zip file, and that zip file you would go back to whatever other environment you are in, and then import that into that environment. That's kind of how we used to do it. And that obviously had some drawbacks, and the drawbacks were, well, how do you do things like version control, or how do you do things like rollback, and what's not, right? Um, just so we are fair to the assessment as well, in Power Apps, you always had the option of, versioning your application. And you had, this was like an internal version control that the platform offered. And you could basically go and promote, if you made a change, go and promote that change, and even roll back to prior versions of your app, republish those, reshare them, etc. And that's what would allow you to do application lifecycle management. But everything, if you notice, that was contained in one environment. Right? You weren't necessarily following best practices and standards for application lifecycle management.
Right.
Now, if you kind of follow what happened next, then came the Center of Excellence, right? COE, and COE did offer some tools that allowed you to promote and publish applications and certainly move solutions across different environments. And so it did offer some ALM standards. Still not enough for professional developers, because you're operating in an environment that still doesn't allow you to do the traditional things that we're used to. And what about code development itself? How do you go about maintaining code, right? So environments were seen as this rigid set of objects that did offer, in a way, this impression that you couldn't really delete them or make them volatile. With ALM, that became, those walls and those myths were broken away. Now with ALM, you can purpose as many as environments as you want, and you can do deployments in any fashion that you want. So for traditional application lifecycle management, you would have your typical development environment, you would have your QA environment, and you would have your production environment, right? And now these are self-contained within my tenant, but think that this could have actually been objects that sit across different tenants, okay? So you don't have to necessarily have these environments in the same tenant. They could be across different tenants. Now, so what transpired then? If I go back to my development environment, right, and you kind of understand the concept of solutions. Well, in order to be able to get this into a DevOps environment, then we had the option of integrating Azure DevOps with your Power Platform environment. And Microsoft, for that, created a set of tooling. It created tooling that did allow you to do that. So if I go here and search for Power Platform, right? I have the Power Platform build tools that were delivered subsequently to Center of Excellence. And what this does is the build tools do offer a set of tasks, right? Tasks that you run inside of Azure DevOps in order to be able to do things like check the solution for problems, uh, you know, communicate to your environment, download and unpack the traditional things that you would do manually are now automated in a very cohesive DevOps experience, right? So let's see how some of this kind of works. So let me go back to my DevOps space and on my project. So within my project, what I have is first and foremost, we submit. We would initialize a repository, right? And although the purpose of this demo is not to go in detail into these things, I want to talk about them and probably lay the foundation for what the DevOps experience looks like. So you set up your repository, right? Initialize it, and everybody who's a professional developer that's work with Azure DevOps knows that you would basically create a README file and what's not, set up anything that you need in your DevOps environment. So the thing now is our how do we get our code that sits in Power Platform within this solution, right? Within a solution over to my DevOps environment. And that's where your pipelines come into play. Okay. And for those pipelines, you will set up a pipeline for each one of the environments that you want to interact with. So you will have a pipeline that pulls the code from your solution and move it into a repository. Okay. And then you will have a pipeline that takes the code from that repository into your QA environment. Okay. And then you would have a deployment pipeline, right? So if you go to releases here, you would have a deployment pipeline that then takes anything that's being QA'd, certified, and ready to go from that QA environment onto your production environment. That's kind of the cycle and hence the life cycle of any application within any traditional development environment, any traditional development team. Okay.
So now it's only one move, right? It's only one action you take to get it to move from one to the other. And
yeah, so the actions are obviously determined by how you do, how you control your development, whether that's through a typical agile methodology, or you're following some sort of waterfall, or you're following any methodology or practice that you establish, is then those cycles are controlled by that methodology, right? How you get code from one place to the other, how often you pull code from one place to the other. Now we're in the era of decentralized development, so pretty much anybody can pull code whenever they want, update whatever they need, and then push back the code into the repository and so on. So that's kind of at a very high level how your patterns would work for getting code from one place to the other. So let me dive a little bit more into this without necessarily getting too detailed.
okay.
So here's my repository pipeline, right? So this gets the information or the code from my solution into the Azure DevOps repository. And basically, we talked about those tasks that we installed from the Power Platform build tools, right? We talk about those tasks, and those tasks can be either, if you are an expert in YAML and you're familiar with the different Power Platform build tool tasks, right? You can comfortably write YAML code that will execute whatever you need it to do at that point. But if you're not familiar with YAML, you also have the ability to just interact directly with the tasks. So for example, if I wanted to, not that I'm going to do it, but if I wanted to delete a solution, I could click here, and then I get kind of this guided things as to what I need to do. So I need to select a service principal. Okay, so let's go and select a service principal, right? I need to then enter the solution name. So I would enter the solution name. And that would then generate YAML code. And let's just go down here somewhere and put it here. So let's say I'm using my solution variable, solution name, right? And that would add that into the list of tasks using the traditional set of traditional set of task-based entries that I could do over here with the build task and convert that into YAML code.
That
Now,
makes me happy because I didn't want to learn YAML. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about it, but that makes me happy.
Some people are not even comfortable with this experience, right? So
it looks a lot like JSON, though. So I mean, it wouldn't. I think it could be pretty easy to learn because it does look a lot like JSON, but still.
Yeah, in a way it does, but think of YAML as a little bit more descriptive, more declarative. So, JSON is very cohesive and very tight and rigid. YAML is a little bit more flexible in the way you interpret and can read things directly. I equate it to some bad joke of assembler at some point. But that's just me. But anyway, here, if you hit a new pipeline, this is something else that most people are not aware of. You can still use the classic editor, and the classic editor does allow you to set up a version control repository. A pipeline. And in this pipeline, you can then simply create an empty job, and from there you can go and do all those nice things directly with the tool set, the build tool set, without ever having to see one line of YAML code. Okay. Obviously, internally, this is translated into YAML, but you don't deal with that. So if I wanted to add a task to this agent, I would just go ahead and just go to Power Platform. And let's say I'm going to add the tool installers. And then let's say I'm going to unpack the solution. And then I would just go and set up my, and I never have to deal with YAML. So that's another thing that I wanted to make note of here. That you don't.
I don't mind seeing it because reading it and editing it is one thing. Writing it is a whole nother.
Correct.
A whole nother case. Yeah.
Correct. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, most professional developers, of course, will be more comfortable in an environment where you have kind of like the ability to fine tune the tasks with YAML code and what's not. So that's kind of how that would work in that case. Okay, so in this particular pipeline, you have, let's see what we have here. We have a set of tasks that will simply install the tools, export the solution. Typically, those are the steps. You export the solution from Power Platform. You would then unpack that solution, which is nothing more than taking that zip file and opening it up into the different archives, and then you would move it to your repository. Very four simple, easy steps or tasks, and that's how you pretty much deal with this. So in the end, when you run this pipeline, I'm not going to run it here because I don't know, sometimes when you're sharing across the board like this, it tends to slow down a lot. But at the end, when you run that pipeline, you should end up with a set of files that are a result of that solution in your repository that you created previously. Okay.
Okay.
So then now the question is, then how do I deal with things like the actual code? If you see here, this is an MS app, and if you here into applications, right? This is the MS app that this is referring to. So if I go to details here, you'll see that this is the MS app that corresponds to that application that we're talking about.
Got it.
That is embedded in that solution, okay? But I can edit an MS app. I can't really, this means nothing for a professional developer. Mm-hmm. But an MS app is nothing more than literally a zip file that contains another set of YAML applications. So with YAML files. So what would you do? As a professional developer, you'll probably clone your repository and use VS Code. And let's see if I can get VS Code up here and running. Because this is the second interesting aspect of it. Let me go back here. And bear with me for a second. Bear with me for a second. So here's VS Code. Look at that. Things are running awfully fast, which is good. So in VS Code, there comes the second aspect of this. So we talked about the build tools that are available for Azure DevOps, right? But also there's tooling available for professional developers in VS Code. And there is this nice extension that Microsoft developed and release has been releasing all the time, called the Power Platform online interface, or Power Platform CLI for those of us who love right? This tool set is available for free as well from the Visual Studio Code Marketplace. And once you install the Power Platform command line interface tools for Visual Studio Code, you get this nice extension that then allows you to do very interesting things. And I'll show you some of the things you can do.
Now, you said that's available in Marketplace, not, is it AppSource Marketplace you're talking about, or?
No. The Visual
Studio Marketplace.
So you would go here so you would go to extensions and you would search for that extension, and just like anything else in the marketplace, right?
Got it.
So you type in Power Platform, and that filters out what we have here for Power Platform. Since I already have it installed, I don't need to go through this process again, but it's there.
Okay.
It's part of my Visual Studio Code environment.
Okay.
And one thing I get asked often that I want to make sure I clarify here as well, these extensions are not available for Visual Studio, not to be confused with Visual Studio Code, okay? So the Visual Studio Code environment seems to be the preferred new modern development platform or development IDE for professional developers. And I know you can do things in here like download Python extensions and download anything that you want that allows you to do development without necessarily be tied to a heavy footprint like Visual Studio is. All right. So going back with that, with what we were talking about, remember that we did talk about the cloning of our repository, and I want to make sure that that's somewhere over here. So we entered this, we cloned our repository, we brought it down locally, and this is what we get. Okay, see, we have the same MS app file here, we have the same meta XML file, the URI file, etc. Right? But one thing that the Power Platform extension does allow you to do is use the terminal window or the command line interface to interact with your development. So now you actually have everything self-contained, right? One of the things that this is the command pack. If you run pack by itself, it will tell you all the options that you have available. So let's see if this will do something. If not, we'll figure out. See, there we go. But I want to call your attention to this specific one. So pack canvas, that allows me to deal with everything that is canvas applications related, right? And it's kind of like a minimized version of it. But if you want to do pack canvas, what pack canvas does then is it allows me to do very specific things like packing and unpacking an application. Well, here's my application. This is my MS app, right? If I unpack this, then I have now access to the source code that is embedded in that MSI file.
Ah,
Okay. So that's pretty cool because now if I look at this YAML file, this does have actual Power FX code that I could basically interact with. And I don't have to be in the Power Apps Studio
get
to
out of
basically work
town.
with my code. Okay.
Okay.
So that's definitely an option for professional developers. If you don't want to have to be in the Power App Studio all the time, you can do this directly from Visual Studio Code. Um, Word of caution: we don't have syntax validation or color coding or any of those things. My gut feeling tells me those things will come later on, but bear in mind that that's not available. But for minor changes or for changes that are ratherly apparent to a professional developer, you can comfortably use an environment like this to do your development.
Well, you know
Okay?
what Citizen Developer is thinking when you show me this? What a cool way to get all of the PowerFX code I've written and be able to
Yep.
copy it to Notepad or
Yep.
whatever source for reference later. I
You don't
love
even you
that.
don't even you don't even have to copy it to Notepad because now you're actually in a traditional development environment. But you know what? When you're done here, the good thing is if I say, for example, I don't want this to be completed, but I want it to say done, guess what? Now I actually have you know, I actually have the ability to make changes directly here. And the beauty of it is then once I'm done, I can go back and use pack canvas. And now I can use the the pack option to repack all this source code into this MS app file and then check this back into my repository. Does it make sense now?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So I check this out, unpack it, made changes, repack it, and put it back in my repository. Now, if you look over here, back at Studio, right, back at Visual Studio, this repository then will have a version, which is what us professional developers are interested in, a version that of this file, this MSI file that I could go back and roll back or branch out if I need to, or make any sort of changes to it. Then then the next thing is I would have, once I, as a developer, I'm comfortable with all the changes that I've made, I could then go back to my pipeline and then have code or tasks, I should say. Well, at the end of the day, it's code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I could have then a pipeline that take all that code that I checked it back into my repository and move it out to my QA environment. Remember over here, I set up a QA environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I would actually have code that takes everything that I packed in my repository and move it back to my QA environment. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. You remember I talked about volatile environments?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can then remove this environment if you want and have another pipeline that recreate this with a newer, fresher code that you just updated. Okay? So those are the possibilities are limitless as far as your practices and what kind of options you implement in your dev practices um, as it refers to Power Platform
So
going forward and handling it
if you
on the
had
side.
biannual 2 releases a year, you could create different pipelines with different names for testing for the Q&A. Then that
Correct.
and
So if you're gonna have, let's say you do 2 releases a year,
mm-hmm.
right? Each release, then you will probably break it down in X number of sprints, right? So
Right.
those sprints will determine how many times you move your code from, well, and I'm just assuming you're using agile methodology, right? So if you have a 4 sprints within that release, then you would probably complete 4 cycles, excuse me, where you move code from your development to your QA and environment.
Uh-huh.
So your QA folks can 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 test the application, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once they certify that the application is good to go, you would then use your release pipeline to move that to production. Okay?
Okay, hang on. Let me mute myself because my dog is going nuts. So I gotta find myself. Keep on
Yeah.
talking though.
So that it all comes down, not as I was saying, to how you manage your transition between each release, how you transition code, and how
Mm-hmm.
many times you have to do that based on the sprints that you have set out to achieve. But yes, that's in a nutshell how you would do it.
That is very
Okay.
cool. Very cool.
So a couple things here, like I have this QA pipeline. Then the task that I have in here, of course, is to install the tools, right? The Power Platform tool installer, which corresponds to this Power Platform. Um, Let me see, Power Platform tools tool installer. Here it is. And the tool installer is nothing more than a set of PowerShell scripts that install basically all the XRM components that allow into the agent that allow me to deal with my environments. And that's in a nutshell what it is. Um, there are some other considerations, of course, but I want to quickly
That's
touch
fascinating.
those. Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
yes. So this is what I spent my time doing,
I am
thinking
so
about.
glad you shared.
Yeah. So
So you
that's what I
spent your
do.
time thinking about what? I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Thinking about
Mm-hmm.
these problems that are specific to professional developers and how they would like to use this platform, right? Um, that's pretty much it.
Uh,
Then, as I mentioned before, once your QA department has certified everything, we're publishing all these artifacts into your artifact staging directory. And here in the release pipeline, you basically set up a release pipeline that then allows you to have a set of tasks as well, right? So let's just edit this. And all this does is it takes the artifacts from my artifact folder and move them to my production environment. So you will see tasks in here for getting the tools installed and importing that solution into my staging directory as a managed solution. So
I have an
overall,
I have an assumption. I want you to confirm or tell me that I'm wrong. And um, so this whole DevOps is even more beyond than Power Platform. I mean, you could use this same kind of concept for any kind of dev environment you have.
any type of development, any type of development
Wow.
that you do. I mean, these are standard. That's why I said this was geared towards bringing Power Platform within standard application lifecycle management practices and standard engineering practices. Uh, Development departments across the world do this for a living, whether they use this type of tooling or any type of tooling that is not Microsoft. Um, you know, Within your engineering practices, you have DevOps tooling that allows you to do these type of controls and manage your application lifecycle. Um, One more thing. So for those who are GitHub fanatics, there is also tooling for GitHub.
I
So you
saw
can,
that.
if you just do, yeah, if you just do Power Platform GitHub,
Oop,
all right,
there you
you
go.
would see that you have a set of GitHub actions also available for individuals or for departments that work within the framework of GitHub. So you have the same
Whoop, hold
actions,
on. The
the
screen is
same
going a
command line
little.
interface.
The screen's going a little slow. Give it a second to catch up. I saw that
Okay.
when you were going through. I saw some of the places that Git and GitHub both were in Azure repositories. I don't know why. Oh, there we go. Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Git is just the underlying tooling and concepts. GitHub is the platform. Okay, so here in GitHub, you can you can create repositories. You can also connect your GitHub repository or environment to the Power Platform environments that you have, and you can use the same, pretty much a set of the same actions that you saw in the build tools are available also for GitHub. So I am not necessarily, or by practice, we don't do GitHub internally here. We use Azure DevOps, but all things being equal, you have almost the same capabilities in one and the other. You also have the extension that I showed you to handle your code in Visual Studio Code, and the practices to check out and check in code are just about the same concept. So, the backend DevOps platform really doesn't matter much here. It's just a matter of what you're used to and what you are comfortable with. That's basically it.
That is awesome. So now you have me absolutely convinced. I definitely need to uninstall the Visual Studio I have and put Visual Studio Code on.
They can coexist, and Visual Studio Code is a fairly small footprint.
I don't use Visual. I don't use it enough to keep both on there.
Yeah, there's something else that I wanted to allude to. So many of you listening probably have environments with MFA. So this is why I had Azure up and running, because when you're doing MFA in your enterprise, you need to, in essence, create application registrations. The application registrations is what you use to set up your service connections in DevOps. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear. That service connection then allows you to tie your Power Platform environment to your Azure DevOps environment via an application registration. And then there is a side effect of that. You have to set up an application user that looks at that connection in your Power Platform admin center, and that's basically it right there.
And but, as much of a hassle as it being the user who has to deal with MFA every time you log in. Trust me, that's much less hassle than dealing with ransomware.
Correct. The concept of having MFA is certainly a security one, of course, and authentication and what's not. But at this level, when you have MFA enabled, there is no sort of user interface per se. Everything happens at the backend level, if you want to call it somehow, the platform.
Yeah.
So
it's about protecting the code.
Correct. So you need to have that in between security registration that ties both your Power Platform environment and your DevOps environment. And I think it's similar concept in GitHub as well. You need to set that up if you do an MFA. So just things to keep in mind when you have that type of setup overall in your domain.
I love everything that you showed me, and now, see, you know what I wish? I wish that people who worked had like school years, so that we would have a summer where we could just stop and learn all kinds of new stuff, and because there's just not enough time.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and so we can go back to our tertulia conversation. So I love it. And as I said, this is the kind of stuff that I've been sort of advocating on lately, and bringing consciousness to engineering practices, and letting professional developers know that that there is room for standard application lifecycle management overall in even if you're using a low code, no code development platform like Power Platform. So very cool stuff.
Very cool stuff. Thanks for being my guest, as well as always my co-host this month. Next month, I'm hoping you're going to join. I'm still working on the date, but Daniel Christensen has agreed to come on. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll be seeing some power ups. Do what?
Our good friend Daniel.
Yes. I adore Daniel. So maybe he'll be showing us some cool stuff that he's been working on. Now that we know how to manage it as we extend it out. So thanks, Mariano. Give Marina and Marcus my best. And
this has been a lovely conversation. As always, love chatting with you. Say hi to Richard.
I will.
Let him know that our love and appreciation is still there. Although I haven't seen you guys in person for almost a year and a half now. So
I know. I want to hug friends so bad, and it's just yeah. Well, hopefully soon we can do that. So
listen.
Okay, thank you everyone for watching, and look for next month's episode. So this wrap
Thanks,
up
everyone.
episode 15. Bye.
Bye.